In today's video, I want to share with you my zero clearance fireplace replacement project that's been going on for almost a year now. I started this project about a year ago now, and it's nearing completion. Of course, the project's been limited by time, personal injury, and finances, so it's getting there. But in today's video, I just want to share with you all the video clips I have of this project, where the project's at right now, and there's going to be a lot of good information in here. So first thing I want to mention is that I'm not a professional fireplace installer. I'm not a professional builder. Before you attempt to replace your zero clearance fireplace, I'd recommend that you confer with somebody local in your area that's fully aware of the fire codes and how things should be done properly. So attempt this project at your own risk. So first things first, let's talk about a zero clearance fireplace and what it is and how it differs from a true masonry fireplace. So a zero clearance fireplace is basically a fireplace box that can be mounted into a wall, and the back, sides, and bottom of the fireplace box can be within basically 0 inches of combustible material. So as we rip this wall out, you'll see that behind this firebox and on the sides, there is wood framing. So this firebox is designed to be enclosed in wood framing. Now, the new firebox I got, the front of the fireplace, like what you're seeing right now where all that wood framing is on the front, that all has to be non-combustible material, but on the backs and sides, the new firebox can be against combustible materials. So that's basically what a zero clearance fireplace is. Now, a true masonry fireplace, you couldn't just rip it out like this. There's fire block around the back and a block chimney going all the way up the house. So it's very different from a zero clearance fireplace. Now, the zero clearance fireplace I'm ripping out is original to the house, which is sometime in the early 90s. And the reason I'm ripping this out is because it's basically zero efficiency. It's not sealed up well. If anything, it sucks more heat out of the house than it puts back into the house. So I'm replacing this with a high efficiency, huge top of the line zero clearance fireplace that will actually put out some heat and warm the house. Now, I was trying to do this project as cheap as possible, so I went to my local fireplace store and I said, hey, I'd like to have you guys professionally install this, a new zero clearance fireplace. Can I save some money by ripping the old unit out myself? They said, sure, no problem. So I saved a couple $100s there, but I didn't feel confident enough to install the unit by myself and put in new flue pipe by myself. So that's why I elected to have a professional local fireplace company do that. Now, when you go to replace your zero clearance fireplace, you have to replace the flue pipe that goes up through the wall and up through the roof. That must be replaced when you redo your zero clearance fireplace. Now, that's very different from like a true masonry fireplace where you're looking to do an insert, right? Like if you're looking to do an insert in a masonry fireplace, then you just put a stainless steel liner in. Zero clearance fireplace, you have to replace the flue pipe going all the way up. So that, just be aware that that has to be done. Also, a quick word of caution, that flue pipe that you see in this clip right now that's freestanding, that actually fell down. So if you do rip your unit out, just be aware that you may have sections of flue pipe that'll just like drop out of nowhere. So use caution. Don't get underneath it. Just understand that that flue pipe could drop at any moment. All right, now let's talk about numbers. So the unit that I chose was made by Valcourt. It's a Waterloo FP15A arch fireplace, if I'm not mistaken. And let me tell you, it's expensive. The price of the unit itself, as you can see right there, is $6,500, but that doesn't include the fire brick or the doors. So total cost for getting this unit professionally installed with the fire brick, the doors, plus the new flue pipe, it costs, I want to say it was a little over 10 grand. And then the cost to finish this project in materials is probably going to be another 4, maybe 5 grand. So let's say that total project cost is around 15 grand. So now I know what you're saying. That's a lot more money than probably everybody wants to spend on, replacing their zero clearance fireplace. I get it. There are cheaper zero clearance fireplace units out there, but I decided to go with this one because it had the highest BTU output out there, and I was looking for the biggest heater I could get for my house. Now, I'm expecting this to save about $2,000 a year in heating costs. So if we take that initial investment cost, $15,000, and divide it by $2,000, That will give us, what, 7.5? So I expect for this investment to pay for itself in 7.5 years. Now, of course, there is a lot of work in terms of cutting and splitting the wood, but honestly, I enjoy that. But another way I look at this, I think it improves the value of the house. Like when I was looking at houses 2.5 years ago, I was always looking for a house that had something that could put out some good heat, like a wood stove or a high efficiency zero clearance fireplace. So, that really caught my eye. And another reason that I had justified spending this much money on this project is because generally I keep the house at 62 degrees. I keep it at the bare minimum, which is pretty uncomfortable, honestly. And having this unit in the house, it actually brings up the whole temperature of the house. Like in areas of the house, it gets, upwards of 70, 75 degrees, when it's 20 degrees out, which that's huge. That improves the morale of everybody in the house. It makes for a more comfortable environment, and I'm saving money on my heating bills. So that's just a couple ways that I look at it. Here are a couple pictures from installation day, and I gotta say I'm really happy that I hired somebody to install this. There's no way I would have been able to get this unit in the house by myself. This thing weighs a couple hundred pounds, probably 400 pounds or something like that. It literally took 6 guys to lift this up the front steps and get it into the house. So they laid down some moving mats, put the unit on a dolly, and just wheeled it into the area where it needed to be installed, and then they transferred it onto the existing framed out wood pad, which lifts the unit off the floor maybe 8 inches or so. And then from there, they finished installing a new flue pipe, and this is kind of what it looks like after they finished installing it. In today's video, I want to give you an update on the zero clearance fireplace project, talk a little bit about the fireplace, some of the things that I've designed into this project so far, and just what I have planned in the future for this project. Really anxious to get it done. We're getting there. It's ready for cement board now, so I'm really anxious to get going on that, but I wanted to whip out the video camera and just show you kind of where I'm at in terms of progress and what I designed into this project. So this is a zero clearance fireplace. This is very different from a true masonry fireplace. So when you think of fireplace, you probably think of a brick fireplace. That's really like a true masonry fireplace, where you have a fireplace and a chimney built pretty much from the foundation up, and it's like all brick. This is very different. This is a zero clearance unit, and basically what that means, you can frame this inside a wall cavity, and you can basically have combustible framing right up against the side of this spacer. So it requires zero clearance to combustibles on all 3 sides, left, right, and back, as well as the bottom. Now from the top up, you do need to have a cavity up there, and you can look in the, whatever unit you're looking at, you can look at the specifications as to how much of a cavity you have to have there. And additionally, on the face of this fireplace, any kind of framing on the face of this one in particular calls for non-combustible framing and non-combustible materials. So that's why the face of this fireplace is framed with metal framing, and it's going to have cement board. Cement board is non-combustible, and then stone veneer on top of that. So that's a little bit about the zero clearance fireplace, which I'm going to do more videos on this thing in the future once I get this project wrapped up. So we'll talk about that, in some coming videos. But anyway, stepfather gave me a hand with the steel framing. Really happy with how that came out. So there's 2 boxes up there. Now, my real father recommended that whether you decide to put a TV up there above the fireplace or not, just run the wires up there and just always be ready to add a TV in the future. I knew from the start that we wanted to add a TV above the fireplace, so that's why you see these 2 pieces of 6-inch flat up there. That's going to give the backing to mount the TV bracket onto. Now, that's kind of like a custom bracket I made up there. Again, I just took a piece of 6-inch flat. There's 2 gang boxes behind there, and there are 3/4 inch single device plates that kind of come from the back, and that's all screwed on there. The box on the left is a 20 amp circuit, and that's just going to have an outlet right there, so that's going to supply the power to the TV and maybe a sound bar. And the outlet on the right is going to be for HDMI cables. And how I designed this, I used 1.5" flex conduit, and I had to get a little crafty here. They do make proper connectors for this 1.5" flex conduit, but I don't know where to find them. So it was just easier for me to weld on these connectors directly onto this flex conduit. It's not pretty, but it's fine. I gotta tighten up that nut. But yeah, so this box right here is going to be for fishing HDMI cables up to the TV. Probably a good idea to fish them down. But that flex conduit runs up along the side, makes a nice gradual loop so it's easy to fish wires, and just goes right up into that box there. So I'll give you a closer look. So all you got to do is fish your wires to the right there, and it's just going to snake down. No problem. Another thing to note upon is that is well away from the flue, or the, what do you call it? The chimney pipe, whatever you call it. And that calls for it being at least 2 inches away from anything combustible. So it does go up through the floor, and there is a metal cowling up there that keeps that pipe spaced away from the floor joist at least 2 inches. Also, another thing that I've added is this fire blocking right here, which I have talked about this before, but initially when they built this house in the 90s, they didn't have the fire codes and regulations that they do today. So this was just an open space up here, and that, you know, if there was ever a fire in this cavity, it would just shoot right up here, go into the floor joist, and just spread throughout the house. So this is 7/16 cement board, and I used some fire caulking around the sides of that just to try and seal up that cavity. And God forbid if there was ever a fire in this cavity, hopefully it would remain right in here. So that is that. You can see the artwork back there. But yeah, one other thing I do want to mention is if you do plan to do a TV up here, and you do plan to use one of these modern fireplaces, here's a little bit of food for thought. This fireplace, this modern fireplace, calls for, well, it gives you the option of having a mantel shelf. You can absolutely have one, but it calls for a non-combustible mantel shelf. And additionally, that has to be up a certain number of inches above the base of this unit. These non-combustible mantles are expensive, and they're hard to find, and it's hard to find something really appealing and attractive. So I decided to go a different route. I decided to do a stepped back mantle. That's what I'm calling it anyway. So basically what's going to happen, this is going to get some wonderboard up here, and then I'm going to go to a quarry and get a custom cut piece of stone. And I'm just going to put that directly onto the cement board, of course using some thin set, make sure it's level. So that's going to be my mantle shelf. And that's really important because I am planning on having a TV up there. That's going to shield a lot of the heat that comes up from this fireplace away from hitting the TV. That's just something you want to be mindful of. You know, if you were to have this going straight up and you had no shield to block that heat from coming directly up on the TV, your TV is probably going to get fried pretty quickly. One other final thing I want to note upon is those 2 junction boxes right there. Initially, you can see the screw holes. I actually had that piece down here, and I changed my mind. The reason I changed my mind, I put the bracket up there and I thought, that's pretty high up, so the TV's probably going to angle down. So if you have the 2 boxes right there and the TV's angled down, that might not give you much room to get the plug in there and the HDMI cables. So I decided to move them up top, so that way when the TV's angled, angled down, angled forward, you have plenty of room to plug in the TV up there. So that's that. That's a little update on this project. And now I'm going to start installing some cement board, and hopefully we'll have a test fire here very shortly. Here are some pictures from the installation of the Wonderboard. I decided to go with 7/16 inch Wonderboard. And also something really important, when you're installing Wonderboard or cement board, make sure you use the appropriate screws. I think the screws I used were called rock-on screws, and they're screws specifically designed for cement board or Wonderboard. Do not use drywall screws. Here's a quick video of a metal plate, flat metal plate that was installed on the floor, and you could also see the fireproof caulking there. So the idea behind this metal plate is if you were to open the doors and there were to be a small ember that got behind the hearth and it fell down to the floor, that metal plate would catch the ember and therefore preventing the floor from starting to smolder and perhaps catch on fire. You'll see later on in this video that I do add a second piece of flashing above the hearth pad. If you ever plan to add a substantial amount of weight to your floor, I recommend you check with an engineer. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a professional builder, do this at your own risk, but as you can see, there's the framing for the hearth, and I added those big brackets and I screwed them down to the floor with deck screws. The reason I did that, there was a little bit of bounce in the floor, and by screwing those brackets down into the floor, I kind of spread out some of the weight of this fireplace throughout the length of that 2x6 that you see right there. It took a lot of the bounce out of the floor. Now, beneath this fireplace is the basement, and in my basement I have those engineered I-beams. Now, the original builders did plan to have a fireplace right there, so they had two I-beams, next to one another. And from my understanding, when you want to put a wall, on the first floor, or you want to put something heavy on the floor, then you want to have two of those I-beams next to one another. So I do have the two I-beams there, and by screwing down that 2x6, it really took a lot of bounce out of the floor, and it helped to spread out some of the weight of the fireplace. But also, in addition to that, probably wasn't necessary, but I did decide to add a load-bearing wall directly beneath the fireplace because I was remodeling my basement, and I just wanted to add a little bit of extra support for that fireplace. Alright, so earlier on beneath this hearth base, I installed that piece of metal, and as mentioned earlier, the idea behind that, if an ember were to fall out the door and fall behind the hearthstone and fall in that crack down there, it'd sit on that piece of metal. Now, when you buy your zero clearance fireplace, of course, it's going to come with an installation manual, and they're going to give you specific instructions as to where to put, the pieces of metal or the flashing. So, I have that piece of metal on the bottom there, but I decided to take it a step further, and I decided to add another piece of flashing and put it kind of tucked up underneath the fireplace, and I tucked it onto the, the piece of plywood on top of my hearth framing. And that's what you're about to see here. It just adds a bit more protection, almost rendering the piece of metal I put on the floor first kind of pointless, but you know what? I'd take all the protection I can get. The material I decided to use is actually a piece of roof flashing. It's pretty thin, but the thing I like about it is it was really easy to shape. I just used a hammer and a dull chisel to kind of hammer it into shape. So after I finished installing that flashing, by the way, I just tapped that flashing down on the floor with some nails. Ultimately, this face is probably going to get wire lath and it's going to get a scratch coat, but anyway, yeah, that flashing that you see right there, that's not secured on the top, that's going to get covered. But after I did that, I added some Wonder Board above the plywood and over the flashing on the bottom. And to add just a little bit more protection, I decided to use some 3M fire blocking caulk, and I just wanted to seal that up a little bit better. Now, how high is that Wonder Board, how low is that Wonder Board from the bottom of the fireplace? It's about 2.5 inches. I'd imagine the hearthstone is probably going to be about 2 inches, so that's going to give me a 1/2 inch of play. Whether I want to raise that up a little bit with some thin cement board or whatever I want to do, but I wanted to leave about 2.5 inches just to give me a little bit of play when I do eventually get the hearthstone in there. I'd rather have it a little bit low than a little bit high, because a little bit high, then you can't really tuck that hearthstone beneath the bottom frame of the fireplace. So that's that. Here's a quick visual example of like if an ember were to pop out, now it has nothing that it can burn if it falls down. And that's as far as I've gotten with this project so far. And thinking what needs to be done next is I need to select a hearthstone, what type of stone, how much overhang I want to have, and then what type of stone veneer I want to put on this board. I'm thinking the proper thing to do is to use wire lath, screw it down to that cement board, do a scratch coat, and then put the stone veneer on there. But that'll probably be for a future video after I heal from my surgery I just had, torn labrum, slowly getting better. But that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below.